Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the October 16th, 2023 Grants Pass City Council Workshop. We're going to start off this morning talking about urban renewal projects with Dana Pierce.
Good morning. I'm Dana Pierce with Economic Development and Community Development. And also Jason Kennedy of Public Works is here too today. He's going to help present some of the information. We're going to start by talking about urban renewal projects and funding. Here's just a quick agenda. We're going to go over the June workshop and just recap what we discussed then, talk about some successes to date, look again at a 5-year implementation strategy, and also review the Council's strategic plan actions for 2023. A little more discussion about private sector grants and loans, and also look at some large-scale public investments. I did want to mention also, we do have Elaine Howard virtually online listening in, and so at the end when we have questions, she can also help with that. She was the consultant that originally helped with developing the urban renewal plan. And also Randy DeLong, our deputy fire chief, is listening in. Okay, moving forward here, we have the June workshop recap. Back in June, we did some short-term resource allocation review. We talked about funding for the water plant and the pool projects. And then we also looked at the different projects in the plan in different categories, looking at them, sorting them by public infrastructure and city-owned projects, looking at ones that could be potentially eligible for a grant or loan program, and then special projects that kind of fall outside of those two categories. At that workshop, Council really prioritized these two topics of the downtown second story and also maybe a focus on housing for low income or workforce. Some of the successes to date, these two projects are underway and we can actually see them happening, so that's a good thing. The Bohemian and the Town Center Plaza are projects that the Urban Renewal Agency approved for support funds, and it's nice to see them moving. Here's some other private investments. I looked back at Elaine's presentation back in 2015, and this was the different list of the areas of town that really needed to see improvements. And so I just wanted to look at those successes so far. So we'll just go through the list. Royal View Motel on Morgan Street back in 2015 was listed, but since then it's been demolished and the Hamilton Inn and Suites was built. On the Northwest Vine area, on Highland Avenue to Morgan, we've seen a storage unit development go in, and then more recently the U-Haul development, the center that is up there. At the Y on 6th Street and 7th on the south end of town, we see that right now that their car dealership there is improving their facade. And then also on the 6th and 7th Street corridor between I-5 and A Street, there's been a gas station that was demolished. We know there's a Pinnacle under construction now. We've also seen the In-N-Out come to town, other gas station improvements. The Best Med, which is the urgent care, went in. Also improvements to facade on the subway. Les Schwab
is now joining.
Oh. And the All Care building went in, and more recently we have plans for Starbucks. And then again, 6th and 7th Street, moving down between J Street and the Y. We've seen the Human Being go in, and Osland Group do an upgrade to the old Bank of America building there. We do know the future library is scheduled to go in that area. And we also have Grants Pass Downtown Suites that was built. Taylor Brewing is doing upgrades and is putting a brewery in there. And then other small businesses like Handprints, for example, that the facade was painted and it's looking nicer. On M Street, the projects that we've seen are mostly housing and short-term rental projects going in along that area. And continuing the list, on the highway and the parkway, we have Rogue Credit Union and Crater Lake Car Wash that have gone in. As far as Spalding Industrial Park, we do have the sewer project underway, and then there has been some structured demolition out there, and there's active planning for development on some of the properties. And we also have a Phase 1 environmental assessment that was completed in that time. Allen Creek to New Hope Road area, that project has started, is scheduled to start in 2004, 2005. So that's underway. And then the corner by the water filtration plant in M Street, we've all seen road car wash go in there. And of course, probably the biggest development we've seen is the Flying Lark there at the fairgrounds.
Mayor, can I ask a quick question?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. On these projects, other than the Spalding, was Urban Renewal resources used for any of these?
No, so that's where private investment we can see is coming to the table. They are doing some of this work.
Awesome, thank you.
This slide is just, I guess, a reminder slide. This is about the tax increment financing. I know you've all seen this chart lots of times, but I think what's of note is the information on the side that it talks about where we should be at in the different phases of the urban renewal district. So in the early years, as you know, it's like incremental revenues are small, and the urban renewal area can incur loans and fund strategic improvements. Now, we haven't done that thus far, but we're heading into the middle years where the development's really expected to occur and boost that incremental revenue. And then the urban renewal has more capacity then also to help fund those improvements. So that's going to be this next 10 years. And then as you move forward here, you can see in the later years, the annual increment revenues are large, but then you're going to be finalizing and completing those projects, repaying outstanding debts, and closing the urban renewal down. And after it expires and the debts are repaid, that tax revenue will return to the overlapping districts, and they'll get to see the benefit of that increased investment in property values. So this is just really something to consider as we're moving forward, how we're strategically utilizing this taxing structure to make our plans for our projects in the urban renewal. Yes.
On that graph, do we ever do a comparison of what our projected graph compared to the actual graph is, as far as the revenues that we are expecting to see compared to the actuals?
I don't know that we've done that so far. Oh, JC has something to add.
Is this on? Yeah, so the graph is actually pretty close. So we're going to be right about the $2 million, which you can kind of see that frozen base, of the 2 to the 4 million. And so right about 2023, 2024, where we're crossing the 4 million, we're right on track. Now, can we sustain that? I don't know. That's up to property values to keep going up, but as of right now, we're currently on pace.
Thank you.
So considering that, a 5-year implementation strategy is probably a good idea moving forward. The purpose of it would be to prioritize projects, effectively and efficiently complete those projects, and strategically allocate those funds. Also, bringing public and private sector together in alignment on some of these projects. It would be helpful to have that plan in place. Some of the benefits also are to identify and secure key sites, leverage resources, and that could be a variety of resources from different areas, private or, from banks or all kinds of different resources. This also allows us time to prepare for larger projects if we have it in a plan that we can look at. It also provides incentives for businesses to stay here or even to come here, and it's a tool for staff also when we're dealing with customers. This is just a quick reminder of the plant allocations as we're moving forward here. You're going to see how these are broken out into the different projects that we're working on, so you can use this slide as a reference. But let's go ahead and look at the strategies, the strategic plan, the priorities that were made by the council for 2023. The first priority was the downtown upstairs space. We are currently working on a survey. It's open right now. It'll close on October 26th. And this survey's purpose, it was sent to property owners in the CBD with multi-story buildings. And it's really to gauge their interest in, restoring the upstairs, also to consider the feasibility and even hopefully get an inventory of those interested building owners. So that's moving forward. The second goal was the downtown plaza streetscape lighting and restrooms. We're also moving forward on that. The Portland Loos have been installed in the Osprey and the Beaver parking lots. The Owl Parking Plaza is also moving forward. There was a survey that went out and is completed, and there will be information presented to council at the next workshop on October 30th on that. The Welcome Center remodel is also moving forward. We're submitting permits this week, and if construction goes to the expected timeline, it would be completed in June of '24. So that's good. We're moving forward on those goals. The third two projects that tied for third place, I guess, was the Southeast Industrial Infrastructure, so that's the area at Spalding, and then the public swimming pool. At Spalding, as you know, we're working on the sewer project there, and we do know that there is some private investment happening. And then the swimming pool, a community forum was done. The pool designs and cost estimates are really close. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit further in the presentation. This is just the allocations, the prior fiscal year allocations for these projects that were set out in the strategic plan for 2023. So you can see there's the URA amount that's been allocated for each project. And then on the far right, there's the total allocation from the URA that we would expect over the whole life of the URA. The two bottom projects are both fall under that same category of the Downtown Plaza streetscape and lighting project. Let's see. So what are the demands for incentives for URA and coming from business, I'd say? And currently we have 7 inquiries on the downtown upper story revitalization or rehab. Those inquiries are related to potentially residential or office use. Something to consider moving forward is we do have resources that can help us on this project of looking at the upstairs revitalization. There's the What's Up Downtown playbook for activating Oregon's upper stories that provides a lot of information. And then there's also a Main Street program, which if our community decides to adopt one, there are resources available to assist, and that can also be paired with URA funds to help those projects become more feasible. The majority of the grant requests that we do get in the whole of the URA usually could fit into 2 categories. Most people are asking for support with building facade improvements or SDCs, more specifically fire suppression, because that's an expensive one. But we also have seen other requests outside of what you'd consider for maybe a grant program. An example of that would be the sidewalk improvements on Vine Street. So what is the purpose in providing these incentives? Well, we have a desire to boost existing business and help new businesses to be in their development and investment here. So things to consider are the current grant and loan programs, the ones that should be serving businesses within the URA. We do have an upcoming economic grant discussion, but in the meantime, we really maybe need to think about should the incentive programs be sorted, have the current programs maybe serve outside the URA and have a new program serving inside the URA. What we need to know to make that decision would be to know where are the businesses located. And we do see that just over 50% of registered businesses are located in the URA. So even though the URA is just 18% of the city, 50% of businesses fall within that zone. You can see the top 3 sectors that with the highest number of businesses, and that's going to be retail trade, the health and social assistance, as well as other services, and these are non-public service, public administration services. So it includes things like automotive, personal care, like massager, estheticians, or those sorts of services. And then accommodations and food services, which in this, you can see the accommodation food services, 65% of those are located in the URA. But I also think it's important to note that even though manufacturing isn't our highest number of businesses, 68% of those are located in the URA. So in looking at all of this, there's potential for 857 businesses of the 1,704 that we know of that could be eligible for URA funds. So a way that we can potentially support those businesses would be with the grant and loan program. We do have 17 established projects in the plan, and probably 5 of those could fall under a grant and loan program. I've listed those here: the North 6th and 7th Street corridor, which is Project 5, blighted building removal and replacement, Project 6, building rehabilitation and restoration is Project 9, underdeveloped land, Project 14, and then housing development, Project 17. That potential program design could include general program rules and guidelines for all of these projects, and then some specific criteria for each one. The other thing we would want to consider is the application process, whether or not we have it be an open season type process or a more competitive application process. So far, there was $250,000 appropriated in FY24 for private URA grants, and to date, the council approved 3 projects that were valued at $225,000. Most of the funds were quickly allocated, and so we did slower advertising for that program, but with those other inquiries that have already been made, we could easily use those funds up quickly. Grants are just one way that we can incentivize private investment. We could also look at loans. That's another option. We do have relationships with some different community organizations. So Illinois Valley Community Development Organization, Ivy Can Do, you may know it as, has a revolving loan fund. We have a city-funded micro enterprise through them that they're managing for us now. So that could be something to consider, having them help us manage a loan program. So Ready also has the ability to potentially provide some loan service. So the policy question here really is, does council support the concept of creating a URA loan program? Something to just consider as we're looking forward. And then stepping away from the grant and loan idea, we're moving into the large-scale project investments. So the council has prior discussions have primarily focused on these 2 projects, the Caveman Pool and the water treatment plant debt service. There's also this potential add of the Hillcrest Fire Station option. We know that these projects are going to have a significant impact on the URA, so we'll look at the financial considerations after we review each project as we're strategically implementing those funds. So the Caveman Pool project, October 10th, that was just last week, the city hosted a public forum to get community feedback on the pool designs that were provided by the consultant. There were 12 citizens that attended that forum and expressed their support for it. On the online community survey is also active and requesting similar feedback on the pool design and amenities. We do know that RSC subconsultant is preparing cost estimates, which also include the modifications from the forum, and that should be available within the next 2 weeks. And staff will also provide council an overview of the design and cost estimates within probably 3 to 4 weeks. So it will be important for us to know and understand the cost of this project. But here's just a little bit from the pool survey, the results, 103 of the 135 responses. They were either very or somewhat satisfied with the designs. And then just looking at it a little differently, 76.3% of respondents were, again, either very or somewhat satisfied with the design. So that's what we have so far. The Hillcrest Fire Station option is something that could potentially be added as a minor amendment to the plan if it's something that is of interest. It is within the URA boundary. It's there at the corner of Hillcrest and Washington Boulevard. It is the oldest of our 3 fire stations. It was built in 1971. And the council has previously considered funding and rehabilitation options for this structure. We would need to get cost updates and estimates, and It would need to be added as a minor amendment. However, because it's a public building, there are rules that apply, and it requires concurrence of at least 3 taxing districts who forego property tax revenue before the project can be added to the URA plan. So that's just something to consider.
Mayor, can I ask a question about the pool a couple slides back?
Yeah.
I just had a question because it says staff will provide council with an overview of the design and cost estimates within 3 to 4 weeks, but I know that there's still some variables for the pool hanging out there that could potentially affect the cost, like pool depth and amenities, and so I wasn't sure if going out to get an estimate before those are a little more solidified is going to have any sort of effect, or if we're going to have to go out and get another cost estimate if those change. Or if a preliminary cost estimate will still be good after, council potentially makes adjustments.
So if council is going to be adding amenities, obviously that would add to the cost. Essentially, this pool design has incorporated all the feedback from not only the task force, but the various council meetings where we solicited the council's feedback for what they would like to see included in the pool. And then at this point, we're making a few design changes to change the bathhouse around a little bit to better accommodate the YMCA. But whether it was as the RFP was going out prior to that or the task force, we've had plenty of public meetings to gather that type of input. That being said, if council is going to change the cost of the pool by adding more amenities than what is currently featured, that would obviously come with a higher cost.
Okay, I just remember when we last talked about the pool, the question of depth of pool hadn't been settled yet because we were considering maybe doing a high dive or maybe doing a platform or maybe doing a couple other things, and that has an effect on the depth of the pool, which I know is a significant cost, and I know that we have not finalized that yet, so I'm not sure if staff has that same opinion or not.
So as far as a high dive goes, that was never a part of the recommendation from the task force or more than just a passing conversation at the last workshop we had prior to going out to bid. Additionally, we are incorporating, I believe it's a 4-meter diving board for this pool because that was the #1 thing that not only our community has talked about wanting back into the pool, but also one of the recommendations from council and the task force. The depth of the pool currently is to the depth that's required by the municipal codes that govern depths of pools. If we were to add a high dive, you would need to increase the depth of the pool for one, and for two, we'd really need to check with the YMCA to see if they would like to operate a facility that has a high dive, because at first they weren't really on board with the idea of operating a facility with a diving board.
Okay, that's good for now, thanks.
Okay, I think we went through that. Now I'm going to invite Jason Kennedy up here to talk about the water treatment plant.
Thank you, Dana. So I actually just wanted to get in front of you and look for some commitment from council on the policy decision of how do we support the water filtration plant project with the URA dollars. It was identified to fund 18% of the debt service, but we can look at that number in several different ways. So what I wanted to do is bring you up to speed at where we're at with financing. The yellow highlighted items behind me are newly identified funding sources from Business Oregon. They shot us an email last week. They identified an additional $21 million in funding opportunity, the bulk of which is at 1% interest rate, with a small portion at 4% loan, and over $4.5 million of that $21 million is grant opportunity. So with that, and the potential $50 million from the BRIC, that brings our WIFIA borrowing down a fair amount, which means that the amount of debt service that we'll have out there will be a lower number for the URA to support. So I know you can't read that. Hopefully it shows up on your printed slides. If it does not, I can get you the actual slides. What we're going to present are two different options. This is the URA paying 18% of the current year's debt service for every year until the URA expires, which is out in 2047. Under that structure, the URA would contribute a total of $7.82 million towards the debt service option. And what that looks like, you can see that in the first couple years, because the payments are very low, that payment would be very small from the URA, and it gets bigger as our debt service would increase. The second option is we look at the total debt of $56 million, and we take 18% of that number, and we break that into 23 equal payments, which would comprise a total of $10.08 million over the life of the URA, which would be paid out in an even increment beginning in fiscal '25, which is when our first interest-only payment would become due. And so that's kind of what we wanted to present, was to give you a couple different options of how the URA can support the debt service. It is important for us to know what council would support as we continue to move forward with finalizing debt options for the water filtration plant. And so that's what I wanted to get in front of you.
Jason, could I ask?
Absolutely.
Oh, I mean, Mayor, may I ask a question?
Yeah, it looks like Rick has a question too.
Go ahead. Back on the funding slide. So the highlighted ones are the ones that would be eligible for URA funding or
Any loan amount would be eligible for URA funding on the debt service. So the yellow ones are the ones that have just been newly identified that you have not seen before. So we showed this same chart, I want to say, at the last presentation we did, and it didn't have these 4 items on it. And at that time, the BIL funds, which is hang on one second. The BIL funds, which is the $6 million here, was identified, but it wasn't yet confirmed. Those are now confirmed that it will be a $3 million loan at 1% and a $3 million grant. But I didn't highlight it red because it was previously on our list, or yellow, highlight it yellow, excuse me.
Okay, gotcha. So as far as the BRIC grant relates to URA funding, if that doesn't come in at 50 million, let's say that comes in at 20 million, what does that mean for loans in the URA?
So that would mean that potentially we would have to borrow more money, but the URA specifically capped the borrowing at $56 million, and we would not ask for more than that.
56 million for the entire agency? Or
No, for this project. It would
For this
pay
project.
18%. Now, it is also important to note, and JC is going to yell at me if I don't say this, we actually just used $56 million. That is not the debt cost of $56 million, but that $400,000 that we're showing here is actually just the $56 million. So the cost of that is actually higher, but we felt that this was less impactful on the agency with the revenues coming in at just over 200 or 2 million. The $400,000 a year is actually pretty manageable.
Okay, so if the BRIC grant comes in at significantly less than 50 million, right now we're saying the agency is going to be around 7 to 10 million for that particular line item for this project.
Yes.
But if the BRIC comes in lower, we could potentially go all the way up to 56 million.
We could. We were told by OEM that they don't change the amount of award on the BRIC grants. So if we make it through all the hoops, the award is $50 million.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Rick?
Thank you, Jason. So on the debt service, and on the urban renewal funds, and it's hard to see on this
I
graph,
know.
but the urban renewal would be portioned out over those years.
So the urban renewal district expires in 2047, and so we would amortize that out over the 23 years that are remaining.
And you also said since the urban renewal funds are coming in at a slow amount, then we would, I want to say, forestall how that is being paid. Because when the debt does not incur until you actually incur the construction costs, and the construction could be, what, 5 years out?
So we've already incurred debt. As you recall, we took out loans for the Safe Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund, the Water Wastewater Fund, that are paying for the design. So this year we will incur, I believe, a interest-only payment. Those debts won't become repayable until we finalize design. Then at that point, we'll have to start paying debt service on those. But then the next loans will not come due until then. But this is the schedule that we think that those are going to start falling due under.
Okay. So the money we, the money we accumulated for the water treatment plant at this point has already been used?
No, we still have quite a bit of cash that we're sitting on, and that will be used to pay the bills as we move forward, because most of these programs are all reimbursable. So it's not like they write us a check and we spend their money, we spend our money and they write us a check back.
Okay, thank you.
Joel?
So, Jason, I had two questions. One is one of clarification between slide 24, the first debt service projection, and the second slide, which is slide 26.
Yep.
The alternative.
Yeah.
And it seems like the only difference between those two is one would have a contribution of $7.8 million from the urban renewal funds, and the other one has $10 million from the urban renewal funds. But then the other implication is the one that only has $7 million from the urban renewal funds, or actually almost $8 million, then they would make up the difference between the $8 million and the $10 million by having more on the water bill.
So it's important to note that all of these debt structures that we're displaying fit within our current rate structure.
Okay.
I want to make that very, very clear.
Okay.
All of these projections fit within the rate structure that you have already adopted. So
Okay.
that's very important. It just means that the URA would contribute roughly $2 million, a little bit over $2 million less to the project under this scenario, where it just starts out by paying 18%. If we only have $100 due next year, it would only pay 18% of $100. If we have $1 million due next year, it would pay 18%. The other one looks at the total amount of debt and then spreads that out over the years evenly to where you could contribute more. That would lower the amount that we're actually paying out of the water fund for this project, which would allow us to put more money into the project in the early years and then more towards capital in the later years.
So if I understand what you just told me, the present net value of the contribution from the urban renewal funds is equal in both alternatives. It's just the timing of the payments and the amount.
No, it is lower in this alternative by just over $2 million.
So it's lower, okay, so by $2 million. So then, the one thing I'm struggling with is, I'm a little dense, if that's lower by $2 million, where does that $2 million come from?
It comes from the water fund, but it's just within the existing rate structure. So the water fund will make up
Okay.
that difference over the life of the agency.
So the $10 million one also has that rate structure. So where does that money go then?
So
under
that
the-
extra money would be either spent on other capital work or making up the difference in the debt service. Because as you can see, those numbers get really, really large in those out years. We're looking at total debt service payments of, just over, it looks like $2.2 million.
Okay,
So, there's a fair amount of payment that has to come with that.
so if I could rephrase what you're saying, then, if we went with a higher contribution of $10 million, the additional money then would not go to reduce the water fee, it would go to other capital investments in water.
I would hate to say that it would
Which is
reduce the rate
needed.
at this juncture.
What's that?
I would hate to say that it would reduce the rate. It's only
Sure.
400,000, and then we have to remember that it stops paying that in 2027 or 2047. And so at that point, we would have to come up with that extra 400,000 in that 48 year.
Sure.
And if we lowered the rates to accommodate it earlier, we'd have to just be raising them in 2047 again to be able to pay for that debt.
Okay. I had another question. It's probably outside your area of expertise. Thank you for that answer. Under the current URA plan allocations, which is several slides back, wasn't part of your discussion, but we talked about the sewer plant loan at 18% of debt service cost. The water plant loan, 18% of the debt service cost is the URA contribution. And there's no dollar figures attached to that because there's some ambiguity, especially with the sewer plant one, the water plant one. And the total of the others adds up to 50 million. So then where my mind goes, okay, so you get grants now for the water plant loan, and the interest rate on the loan has gone down, so that means the contribution from the water plant loan to the URA, given no other changes, would go down. And the URA then would have funds that could be allocated elsewhere.
That is correct.
And given that it's an unknown, we don't know what that is, or we do know that if we get the BRIC grant for 50 million, it's going to make a huge difference on what that contribution is from URA that's needed, and if we do get it, it should release a bunch of URA funds for other projects.
Not a bunch. We're pretty well at that same level. If you saw those other numbers, we're still borrowing very close to $55 million. Just from various sources, some at very, very, very low interest.
Right.
But others are going to be at market rate, which is probably going to be, I think it's pushing 5% right now, 4.85%.
I'm surprised it's not higher than that. Okay, so you don't see any bonus then from the grants in terms of URA's contribution to the water treatment plant?
Well, the grants definitely help, and as we continue to find more, but I don't know that we're going to be able to offset those loans that much more. Having identified 50 million, I think we've already gotten about 3.5 or 4 million in grants.
Sure.
Plus the next 4 million. We're going to keep looking for grant opportunities, but I don't know that we're going to move the needle that substantially to be able to affect what the URA could contribute. The council does not have to choose to contribute that much to the project.
Yeah, but there would be, the needle has been moved somewhat as we get those.
Quite a bit.
Yeah, and we don't know what that amount is that's displayed on this briefing, correct?
Well, as close as we've identified, it's what is displayed right there. We believe this is where we stand today financially. I don't expect it to move that much more one way or the other.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Does anybody else have questions about the water treatment plant? Brian?
DJ, go ahead.
So, yeah, given that information and these two options we have, are you comfortable with letting us know at this point, with the information you know, what you might recommend of the two?
I'm going to lean towards the higher number. It is going to be the most beneficial, especially if we can get that into the budget in the fiscal year 25 for a couple of reasons. One is it will automatically start paying our interest-only payments without having to shell out any more money, which leaves us putting more cash into the project, which means that when we get to borrowing finally on WIFIA, that number is lower, which will shorten our repayment period.
Brian?
So is this slide saying that the water treatment plant cost is 128.8 right now?
So that is the last, no, that's saying that we've identified 128,859 in revenues, and that the project cost is the 123.8, which was the last number that we presented. And if you remember, that was like 108 plus 15 million for the BRIC, the cost of complying with BRIC.
Okay, so that unidentified funding line of 5 million, what does that mean?
It's a negative 5, which means that we're $5 million to the good with the identified funding.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right.
So let's see, something that Jason did mention is that we do know that about $2 million is projected as our current estimated annual revenue for the URA. That's at a 3% growth. And let's see, that it is a conservative number. As we have that incremental TIF happening, there will be more investment, and there's potential for additional revenue, as well as those properties that are coming off the enterprise zone abatements, those will come onto the rolls and could contribute to some additional revenue. But conservatively, we know that about $2 million is available. So, or should be, I guess. The policy question here is, how would the council like to prioritize these large-scale projects, public investment specific projects? We went through the water treatment plant debt service. We know that there's $5 million that's been allocated for the caveman pool. What is the best route moving forward strategically to pay for that in cash, or should we look at a loan or a bond potentially for the pool? similar to a project like the Hillcrest Fire Station. Would a loan or a bond be a better option for the URA? So those are just things to consider. Our current cost implications, the balances of last week, we're at 4.1 million as the balance in FY24. Our budget was really flexible. We didn't really have a specific allocation, just 5.7 million is allocated for special payments, and those could be transferred as needed. And there was an appropriation for $250,000 for grant opportunities. Also previously, there was consensus in January for the FY25 budget to start contributing to debt service. So the call to action today is at your discretion, and we're looking to prioritize and provide staff direction on implementation for the 3 public investments. There's also this question of, does council want to do a budget adjustment to accommodate those outstanding inquiries for URA support, or hold firm on that 250 for the FY24? Also, another question, does the council support use and publication of the grant and loan policy? So with that, I will, we're open to questions. Reagan, sit down.
Questions? Joel?
One of the things that strikes me is, so we don't know yet the estimate for the caveman pool. We don't have an estimate for the capital investment needed in the Hillcrest Fire Station. We do have an estimate that was made a couple of years ago in terms of replacement or fixing what we have. And then the water treatment plant debt service, in terms of those two, which has a $3 million difference, and how that plays out, and then what the other water revenue is used for those other capital investments. So I'm not sure I have enough information right now, not knowing those 3 things to, if you have, it's an allocation of scarce resources, and so that's when you prioritize. If you have money to do everything, then that makes it easy, right? Well, we don't have money to do everything, but we don't know what they cost, so we really don't know at this point in time, and we would know fairly soon in the future, at least with the caveman pool and the Hillcrest Fire Station, what the price tag is on those things, so we could prioritize them with the amount of money that we have. And that would be an important piece of information for me. And to do that without that, I would just have to go back and do it once I realize what we think they would cost. Just my thoughts. That's a roundabout question that had no question. I apologize.
Okay, good. I was wondering what Dana was supposed to answer there.
Yeah.
Did you have a question?
Well, I was going back to the fire station with needing to get the 3 districts to approve, and so I think that's something that we'd have to know as well. I'm trying to think of how many districts we have that are at this point. Obviously, District 7, School District, Library District, Josephine County. So, I mean, that would make a difference too, is whether they were willing to do that for the fire station. So, to have, as Joel said, to have all the information, I think we kind of need all those pieces.
Dana, on the $250,000 that we have allocated for the grant program this year, what are the specific criteria, or are there any, for the grant program besides being in the URA?
We don't have specific criteria, really. We're just doing it based on, I guess, prior examples with the Bohemian approval and the information that we do have within the plan.
So right now, we're doing first come, first serve as far as that goes?
Yeah.
And is there a percentage requirement as far as their investment versus our potential investment?
Yeah, the prior two were a 50% investment for the project, and those were modeled after our other grant programs. I believe that Bohemian was a 25% request, but ended up being less because we did a cap on it. So there's kind of a varied criteria, I guess, at this point.
And then at this point, would all those requests be coming to council?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I think that's one question that council needs to look at, because it did come up during that day when we were awarding a couple of the grants most recently is whether you want there to be specific criteria, percentage match, and then Dana's also asking, we're spent or allocated 225 out of 250 for this fiscal year, whether you want to change that dollar amount at all. Aaron, you have something?
Yeah, I just wanted to build on what the mayor was talking about. In one of the first few slides, Dana did show that there are about 5 different categories that businesses can, or private industry could utilize some of the urban renewal agency dollars for a grant program. So if council would entertain staff developing those grant programs with criteria associated with those, we would like to do that to provide that additional clarity in those. Now, you don't have to fund those right off the bat, but to have those established and written in policy would be good. And so if council would entertain that, we would like to submit to you the different grant programs with applications associated with the programs.
Okay, and then the other thing that came up along the lines of the grant has just slipped my mind. Criteria, the 250,000, oh, and whether or not you're interested in it being first come, first serve, or done on a biannual or annual basis. Did you have something on the grant program, Val?
I did, well, yeah,
Okay.
I did. I was asking when I was going back to, I guess it was slide 12, the URA incentive demand about the downtown and upper story, whether we can make that kind of a priority, as seeing as we kind of prioritized that we're really working to try to build something in terms of upstairs. Is there a way to prioritize that in the URA grants? I don't know. And when we
yeah, if I could, this is Brad. So as Dana mentioned, what we have active right now with those who own multi-story buildings in the URA is a survey so that we can basically just get a baseline of exactly, so we can bring to council, here's the square footage, you know, here's what we anticipate could be converted to dwelling units, you know, depending on what that response is. So that doesn't really cost anything. We were going to take the results of that and then put together just a short, if council supports this, kind of a short-term task force, maybe like 3 meetings that would be comprised of a broker and would be comprised of downtown owners and, you know, possibly a CEDC member, et cetera, and just kind of review that data and bring back, you know, a very specific plan. And we think that that can happen before, you know, the end of the year, because the survey's only open for a week or two. So again, that doesn't cost any money either. So I think to your question, Councilor, about sort of the level of funding from the URA that would go specifically to that, it's really going to be a result of the outcome of that task force, because we'll know, you know, is it really worth it if we're only talking about 7 or 8 units that are potentially going to be created downtown? You know, how much leverage do you really want the URA to have in terms of incentivizing that, or, you know, do we focus on other things? But so for the next 3 or 4 months, we're not anticipating to use any URA funds to get that baseline data so that we can bring that to you.
Rick and then Brian.
I would also be in favor of the task force and the grant program, but when that information comes to us, as already been indicated, 7 inquiries downtown and upper story development, I think it would help me to be informed if I knew what the anticipated, let's say draw isn't the right word, but funding might be needed for those, if it's a large amount or a small amount, to realize just how the program would function and what the demand would be on the URA. Thank you.
JC.
Sorry, I'm just going to step in here a little bit and give a little bit of financial overview. If you could turn it to slide 7 for me, which is the showing the base and the tip.
The 7, did you say?
Keep going.
Which one?
It's the base.
Is it this one?
Keep going.
Sorry.
That one right there.
This one?
The tip.
Okay.
Yep. So if you look at the graph.
Eric, can you hear me? This is Rob.
Hang on just a minute, Rob.
So if you look at the graph for 2024, which is about $2 million. So we gave a memo, I believe it was 29-2023, about the URA and the debt service that it can maximize. And so you have to have a 1.5 cushion or a 50% cushion above your debt service. So at our current funding levels, that means we could potentially do one $15 million project if you're going to take the debt out for 20 years. A $10 million project if you are going to do that in 10 years. And so when you're thinking about projects, you could do it to where you're basically stacking them, where you have a 10-year, but you're going to need to wait 10 years to do the next large project. Or you can kind of squash it out over 20 years and then potentially wait 6 or 7 years to do another sizable loan. So it all depends. Again, it's going back to what Councilor King and everybody's saying. We don't know the prices of all these things, but you can start kind of financially stacking them out where you can kind of prioritize of what you want to get done first. And it all depends what do you want the grant program to be as well. And so you have to still have that cushion of the 50% above your debt service. They allow for you to use part of that 50% as operations, but as your operations grows, you have to still have that coverage. Hopefully that made sense and didn't muddy the waters at all.
I'm going to come back to Brian in a couple minutes. Elaine has something to add, and then Rob.
Thank you. This is Elaine, your urban renewal consultant, and this is just a small point, but I wanted to make sure we understand that if you wanted to do the fire district project, you have to have 3 of the top 4 impacted taxing districts approved. So it's not just any 3 districts, it's 3 of the top 4 who are impacted. And I believe those top 4 for you are the city, the school district, the county, and the library district.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Rob, go ahead.
Brad, getting back to that survey on the property owners on the upper floors, how broad was that survey? Did it go out to all property owners in the central business district, or what area are we talking about?
We are talking about only the central business district, and we're talking about only property owners who have a multi-story structure on their property. I believe it ended up being between 70 and 80 total owners.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, Brian.
Yeah, this is a really big topic, and there's a lot of moving parts, but I have a few different questions. The first one is about adding Hillcrest Fire Station to URA. I'm not clear why we have to get approval of the other taxing districts. Like when we added the pool, we didn't have to do that. So I'm just not clear why, if we add the fire station, that is like a requirement. Maybe that's for Elaine.
This is Elaine. I can jump in on that if you'd like me to.
Go ahead.
In 2019, the legislature amended ORS 457, which is the statute that covers urban renewal, to identify public building projects. It was done at the request of special districts, associations, and most notably fire districts who didn't like urban renewal money being spent on public buildings. And at that time, they provided a definition of what public buildings are, and a fire station is specifically defined as a public building in the changes in the statute. And so a park and rec facility is specifically defined as not a public building. So that is the reason why the pool doesn't require this and the fire station does. So unfortunately, that is tied directly to the definitions in ORS 457.
Thank you for that clarification. Dana, one of the things that was mentioned in here was potentially looking at a loan program. It says, we can do a grant program, but there's also a possibility of doing a loan program. And I know that we were at League of Oregon Cities last week, and one of the sessions I was in was talking about utilizing a revolving loan fund because you get to reuse dollars again and again and again instead of just one time. So is a revolving loan program is something we can potentially look at doing if we so choose, right?
Yes.
Okay, and then you said that we already have a revolving loan fund program with IV Can Do for city-funded microenterprise?
Yes, we do. And they're administering that program right now, so it looks a little bit different than if we were to administer a URA program through the URA itself. So you could choose to do it either way. We could contract it out and have them administer it for us, or we could look at it internally.
Okay, and then So Ready also has a program where they do a similar type of thing?
They don't have an established program. We have talked to them about it though previously, and they did say that it's something that they think that they could probably provide. So if it is of interest, we would pursue that further and find out what that looks like.
Okay, great. Regarding the fire station, I feel like I need more information on that before, again, like Joel, before we kind of go down that road of knowing even if we should be adding it to the RA. So I guess, are we going to be getting more information on that project or that potential project here soon as far as scope options? Because I know that that's something that council's asked for a few times.
Yes, and as you know, we've had some transition and some fire season, et cetera, on that. Randy is now taking a look at picking up those pieces and finishing that memo to council, and I've talked to him about that, and that'll be something we'll be getting to you.
Okay, and that memo has options for us, or is it just looking at one specific option?
That memo is a broader scope look at what may be nixed and what may be in line for Hillcrest Fire Station if council is wanting to look at doing some improvements to that or looking at a new station altogether.
Okay, any ETA on that?
I've put an ETA out before and we did not hit the mark. I do not have an ETA for you. As I said, we are currently right now extremely strained in fire, and we're just trying to get through right now with providing basic services to the community in an efficient and effective way, but it is on Randy's high priority list.
Okay, thank you.
Valerie?
Yeah, I have a question on a loan too. So when we do a loan, and if we do a loan, how does the interest rate figure into that?
I would probably have to ask JC the answer to these questions. It depends on, like I said, how we structure it. So it depends on if we do it internally.
So we do have some other programs in the city that have a calculation based on CPIU in the last 3-year average. That's up to council, I guess, of one of the parameters that you could potentially define yourself. We have other interest rates out there, like our local government investment pool, which is typically at a favorable rate. It's right about 4.8 right now, which isn't necessarily maybe the greatest of interest rates, but that's what the city's getting on its return on money. So I think the 3-year CPI is up above 5, maybe 6%. As the last time we calculated that. So it all depends on how you want to do it. Other places I've been, it's really up to, I guess, what you deem as fair as far as setting policy.
So it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be the 7% or 5 whatever percent that's out there floating in the world of banks.
No, right, but we are currently, if Jason were to take his revenue bonds out for the water, we just got a quote that it would be around 5%.
Okay.
I think theoretically we could do a 0%, right? And the benefit then is that we're reusing the same money for several different projects rather than trying to earn back interest on it.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying is, could we do that? Is that part of it?
Right, if you do it 0, in theory, the time value loss of money, you're going to be decreasing that value over time.
Other questions right now? All right. So I think We need to talk about whether or not you want to set some parameters for the grant program and whether or not you want to change that budget allocation for this year. We need to talk about whether or not you want to consider a loan program. We need to talk about the contribution structure for the water treatment plant and whether you want to look at that $8 million or $10 million investment. And we need to maybe ask any questions you have about fire station, although it sounds like staff is recommending that we take a little breather on that right now while they just deal with operating the fire department. Any other major topics that anyone wants to cover in this discussion? Val?
I would like to think that they could go out and talk to the other districts before and get an idea if they're open to that at the same time they're getting the information on the fire station costs. So, because I think that'd be pretty important to do that first before putting too much heart into it if they're not open for that. So I think that's important. I'm in favor of the going for the larger debt service projection, 10 million. So that one I feel pretty confident that I feel that would be, so that's one I feel that I could knock off if everybody else felt the same way.
All right, let's talk about that one first. Anyone have any arguments for doing the lower amount on the water treatment plant? Brian?
I think I just want maybe clarification on that. So if we did do the lower option, it would essentially be backfilled from the Water Enterprise Fund, is that right? And you said that the current rate structure is able to support that?
Yes.
Okay, well then I would argue for that one.
For the 8 million? Yeah, I was going to say, I think just the advantage is whether or not you want to spend that $2 million from your URA, because it sounds like the water department can also figure out how to handle it from within their funds. Is that the difference there? Is that we would have $2 million more to spend on urban renewal projects?
I'm going to jump into it.
Okay.
I do appreciate council's comments about going for the 10 versus the 8 and do appreciate that. Still with the unknown costs and how we see things increasing all the time, that is the conservative approach, is to choose the $10 million option. I remember sitting here in front of council celebrating a $3 million grant that we got for the water treatment plant. And because of that, we stopped increasing water rates for 2 years because we had it covered. And now look at what we had to go through. So from that perspective, I just wanted to put that from a historical point of view, what position that put us in. So when you have an option of helping the water treatment plant a little more and the water fund a little more, we appreciate the potential of choosing the 10 million over the 8.
All right, well, unless we have further discussion, I'm going to assume that the council is leaning towards the 10 here.
Yes.
All right.
I don't know, you only heard from one on one and one on the other, so you might need to have people speak
Well,
up.
people were nodding their heads with the 10 and nobody spoke up after the
I'll say
8.
10.
Okay. So I think,
Joel, that sounds, yeah,
Joel.
speak.
So I support what Brian said in terms of the revolving fund. I think that's a great use, and we can use those, we don't use those dollars. We can need those dollars for investment in our community over and over again in cost-effective projects. So I think that's a good way to go as well.
so you're actually
In terms of
leaning
our loan
towards the 8
policies.
million? Oh, are you
Well,
talking about the water treatment plant?
I'm talking about a different subject.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Don't you
So,
think that- Are you going for the 10 or the 7? We're trying to
yeah,
get,
exactly.
We're trying to get people
Water-
speaking
Water
up.
treatment plant, I think,
thought we
you know,
said-
Brian has spoke up in support of the $8 million investment. Unless I hear anybody else, I'm going to assume you're all supporting the 10. Okay. We're leaning towards 10 on that one. How about a loan program? Are people interested in establishing some sort of loan program in addition to our current grant program? Valerie?
Yes, I would be, just because I do think that, like I said, I like the idea of revolving and having things, you know, part of it turn over at a good interest rate.
And any parameters or particular thing that you're interested in setting it up for? Brian?
I would just leave it to staff to make recommendations for that.
Yeah, we'll bring something to you, and there can be some modifications and some key points that we can discuss with you when we bring it forward.
Okay. Is that okay with everyone? All right. All right, grant program is maybe a more complicated thing here right now, so I guess, first of all, what we have right now is $250,000 allocated for this year. $225,000 has been allocated or has been distributed, basically. So is there any interest in changing that allocation for this year or leaving as is? Aaron?
Just to keep things smoother, maybe my recommendation for council's consideration would be if that would be discussed potentially after you take a look at the different grant programs that we bring forward at the same time with the loan program. And then if you like those and you'd like to allocate additional resources into that time, maybe you'd allocate the resources.
Okay.
That's assuming that council would like us to develop the couple of 5 or so different grant programs with criteria that you can approve.
Okay. Brian?
I would be in favor of staff developing those program parameters for those 5 line items that they called out. I'm also pretty uncomfortable with the current grant program that's open because it's essentially wide open. There's no parameters, there's no guidelines, there's no guardrails. So, and I would be in favor of just kind of pausing that until we get these other ones lined up and framed out. Yeah.
That is paused at the moment. So it's at a stay right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, is council interested in having, if you look at slide 15, I think those are the 5 that we're referring to? Okay, are you interested in having staff write up some guidelines for grant and loan programs that would work for all these top 5 bullet points here? That's the North 6th and 7th Street corridor. We're on the wrong slide on the TV there, but North 6th and 7th Street corridors, Project 5, blighted building removal and replacement is Project 6, building rehab and restoration, Project 9, underdeveloped land, Project 14, and housing development, Project 17. Valerie's nodding yes, Rick's giving thumbs up. Brian, you have your hand?
Yeah, I don't know how long it'll take staff to develop all 5 of these. I don't know how different they'll be, but if it's easier to expedite them, I, for one, think that the housing development one is pretty important and a pretty big opportunity for us, as well as the building rehab, because we've already kind of prioritized that one. So if it can come back to us quicker, if you're just prioritizing a couple of them, that's great, but if you can do all 5 before our next meeting, that's even better.
Brad?
We do have a really good start on them, so I think that between Dana and Aaron and I, we can bring all 5 together.
Rick?
I would be in favor of seeing all 5, and I think, as Brian said, I would be tending towards emphasizing housing. So I think in the grant program, we can set limits that show that priority, and that would be one prerogative or one way of looking at it when we review it. Thank you.
All right, and is the upstairs, the downtown upstairs project, would that fall into this grant program, or do we have another budget item that's dedicated for that?
Currently, if it was just individuals coming to us, it would probably fall under the building rehabilitation program, but council could consider having a separate specific program for that. I imagine funds would still come out of that project category for it, but that's something I think that could be considered.
Okay, obviously 250,000 is pretty small compared to the totality of what we're looking at here on slide 9. So in the grant program that you'd be drafting for us would draw on some of these other line items as well? Is that what we're thinking?
I'm not sure I understand that. what you're asking.
Well, you know, just the 250,000 was kind of obviously this initial allocation, but we have several different projects, right? So we're talking about more than 250,000.
Yeah, I guess so,
going
yeah.
forward.
Yeah, we are. We
Okay,
were talking
larger
about an accumulation, a
Yeah.
total sum of the different projects and what you have allocated for each one of those projects as potential budgeted revenues for you to
Okay.
award.
And the 250,000 is on pause right now. I'm not sure if everyone heard that, our viewers at home or whatnot. Okay. I think we worked through all the questions that I had written down. Does anybody else have loose ends hanging out there? Brian?
I've got a couple things. One is, and I think we've touched on this in a previous urban renewal meeting, but looking at the potential of bonding against the agency. And I know that that has been discussed, and I think that, you know, we have the opportunity and the potential to do that right now. I don't know if council necessarily knows how that would work or how that would play out. So maybe if we could have a little bit more information on how that might work at the next urban renewal meeting, I think that might be helpful. And then the other point that I had was about Caveman Pool, and the way I remember council's last discussion about that is we were not settled on some of those finer details, and so I'm pretty hesitant to send it out to bid until we have another discussion to talk about those details, because I feel like if we go out for a bid and it's at a lower level, that we're not even going to be able to consider the higher level once we have this lower cost estimate. So, yeah, Aaron.
Yeah, just from a process, I want to make sure we're clear. The consultant right now was just gathering data that was based on direction from council about, you know, which schematic do you like best, or do you prefer 1, 2, 3 that we brought to you at the council meeting? Council chose 1. Then they are receiving public comment on, well, here are some general features of the pool. Is this hitting the mark? And we got the survey and some stuff like that. So they're doing cost estimates right now. There's no going out to bid. We have not finalized the design or exactly what's going to be at the pool. So the next thing that's going to happen is the consultant, along with staff, is going to be bringing that to you once we have those cost estimates associated with the input that they receive from you and from the public. And then ultimately, moving forward, we may discuss, okay, what's next? How are we going to fund it? And then we go through that bidding process and the construction process. So we're just right now gathering cost estimates based on conceptual designs.
Okay. I sent an email Wednesday with a handful of questions about the pool that I hadn't yet received a response to. One of them was about the width of the pool, and there was a few others in there. So I just don't want us to get too far out ahead with talking about cost before we've talked about scope. And I feel like we're maybe doing that a little right now.
So you and I are both at the same conference Wednesday, and I have not had a chance to look at my emails since we didn't get back until Saturday afternoon. So we will be responding to that email and getting you that additional information.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, on the URA, I guess some of these, when I look at slide 9, if we have slide 9 with all the different plan allocations, you know, we have divided up, I'll just grab like North 6th and 7th Street corridor, $4 million have been allocated for that. Is there any sort of direction that council has given at this point on what to do with that, or any sort of big vision, or is it just, is that as much as it's been fleshed out?
We have not received direction from council on a specific project within these programs. We've brought it to you several times. There's been general conversation about, let's continue to do this, and of course you reallocated some money. But if you took, in your example, Mayor, just that one, there has not been any discussion or direction about, we want to focus on these properties or this sub-area or anything like that. That gets to the community forum that we had in 2021. There was about 15 to 17 folks that came, and that was one of the topics that was kind of talked about was, well, what's the incentives? There was general support at that meeting to continue with providing private property owners the opportunity to have the grants or the loans, rather than the city going in and using that $4 million and actually doing, for example, a street upgrade or putting in new street lights or benches or something like that. So other than that forum and the general consensus being, we want to provide more opportunity for private investment rather than public in those 5 projects, there has not been. I do think that you'll have a better sense for how it could work after reading the guidelines that we're putting together.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that we're getting to that stage, because I guess I feel like, and I know that on slide 7, we're moving into the middle years here, right, in 2024, and so we're almost at 2024, and we've had several meetings where we've kind of decided how to slice this pie, and we've come up with different allocations for a number of different projects, and it's time to actually flesh those out and start spending the money, or like Brian indicated, if we have something large we wanted to bond for to get that going. There are a couple of projects in here that may not be relevant anymore. I know the maker's space was a big deal at one point, and it's pretty much off the table, I think, at this point. We have $1 million that we'd allocated to Town Center Plaza when we were talking about doing something significant with that property, and now we're not. So, but we keep having these same meetings where we just, reallocate 1 million here, 2 million there, or whatever, and we need to actually come up with some way to get some movement on these. So I guess that would be something I'd encourage both staff and council to talk about before we come back at this again. Because $250,000 for like a grant allocation is not very much of what we're trying to do here, and we would need to make some big progress in our city so that we actually spawn some increased development out of this before we get too much further into it. And I hear somebody's child in the background. Is that somebody who's wanting to talk?
Yeah, that's me, Sarah. Sorry, I unmuted myself.
That's okay. Go ahead, Rob.
Thank you. So I agree, by the way, with everything that you just said about essentially cleaning up that list, because there's things on there that really are not likely to apply in the future. But with regards to, it's a small point, but with regards to the pool, I'm not sure if I understand the process here. We had, council decided that we were going to have a task force, which we created, and they reported back to us, and they reported back features that they thought they wanted on the pool. Council discussed that a bit, and now I don't understand about this other, Aaron just mentioned, other input, from the public, and that we'd be going out essentially and getting estimates, from a consultant, basically using the consultant's time to get input on some of the other things that other members of the public have suggested. I don't understand, what gave or gives these, whoever they are, these other members of the public, any authority to essentially give direction. And, I have to believe that there's probably 10,000 people in the city, 10,000 other members of the public who, for instance, don't really have any preference or couldn't care less about, what the bathhouse looks like, for instance. There's probably 10,000 people that want a pool and would like the amenities and don't really care so much of what it looks like, but yet we've got some, what appears to me to be some small handful of people that may be driving the project in slightly different directions. So could someone explain to me how these other members of the public got authority to essentially go out and ask for estimates?
So this is Brad. I mean, if council, you're referring to the community forum that we just had last week? Is that what you're referring?
Correct.
Yeah,
Right.
we held that as a direction of council that asked for additional input after the last Caveman Pool meeting. You wanted to open it up, and so that was, there's really no authority, so to speak, other than, we're reporting back out the results of what that forum was. That's the only additional outreach to date that we've done, and that was done at council's direction.
Well, thank you for that clarification. I know that we get, multiple emails from, some members of the public that, seem to want some specific looks or amenities or so forth. And I just guess, my comment then is to the rest of the councilors. I mean, at what point do you stop gathering input and just move forward? And, it would be never ending. We could have community forums forever, but, we all know that I think we all know we want a pool. We know we want some specific features to the pool. I'm just kind of, I think I've heard enough input, quite frankly.
I think at this point, the input is over. That survey closed last Friday, so staff will be getting back to us with whatever feedback they received, as well as these kind of initial cost estimates, and then the council can decide how to move forward, I think is where we're at. Dwayne?
Yes, thank you. I'd have to agree with Rob a little bit. The person that seems to be driving this pool idea doesn't even live in the city limits or work in the city limits, and I brought this up to Aaron. I'm really concerned that this Emily lady lives out by the Williams Fire Station. That's where she lives and works, and she's the main driver and the focus group of this. And it just seemed like, well, she doesn't even pay taxes in the city or belong to the city limits, so why does she get to decide how our pool is? So I'm just a little confused about that.
Valerie?
Well, I just want to say that the direction was, when the people came back, that we did the forum because the designers were here. So it was kind of like one of those things. They came in, they're doing the final design, so it only made sense that, people had asked for a forum, that we gave them that opportunity to look over what the design was, because the design hadn't been out there yet. So I don't see it as anything negative. I think it was just the designers coming and saying, okay, we've got a design. Before we move any further, is there anybody, and anybody could have been to it. It was advertised quite, out on Facebook and that stuff. So I don't understand, I guess, the worry that there's one more group, because we just were basically following along with the designer and getting their design, coming back for one final input from the public to be able to put together their final numbers. So I guess I just don't understand what the problem is with that.
Brian?
I just want to make sure that I'm clear that when the pool project comes back to council, it sounds like we're going to probably have some sort of cost estimate that's going to be shared with us at that point. Is that accurate? Okay, and is that cost estimate going to include the option or the cost for a deep end that could accommodate a high dive or a platform or some other feature like that? Is that going to be part of the numbers that are going to be presented at that time?
Well, Brad might be able to fill in. When we were having a discussion with the consultant in our workshops, I don't think a deep end high dive was discussed as an option. If that's something that council now would like to have as an item, then we can include that, or have the consultant include that as a potential option. I know we discussed other things like slides, the depth of slides with water, maybe a diving board, and other features that the consultant was going to have as potential items for you to consider as additions or subtractions, and what that cost might be if you wanted to add those. But I'm not sure, maybe Brad or Josh can explain. I'm not sure if a high dive and the depth of a high dive was included in that, but we can include it if that's what council wants, or make sure it's included.
Yeah, it was not. I mean, in terms of the current scope that RSA is working on, it does not,
Okay.
in terms of that depth. So, again, I think it would be important to get YMCA, assuming that they continue to be our operator, As Josh mentioned, they have voiced some concerns about continuing to be the operator if we add the high dive. So I would like to get that, from them, be able to bring that back to you. But certainly if council's direction is, you want us to pursue the high dive, then we will go to RSA and we will have them do that cost estimate with putting that additional depth in. I mean, but to date, it just hasn't been there.
I think Josh mentioned a 4-meter board, is that what you said? So that would be approximately, 12 feet high?
Yeah, it's a 4-meter board is what we ended up with the design, which the depth of the pool is based off the regulations for how deep a pool has to be based on the size of your board. As previously mentioned, high dives, not really a part of the conversation. Task force, even when we put the scope out in July, we sent council a memo to review the scope before we stuck it out for the proposal, and we didn't get feedback to include a high dive. If the majority of council wants to see what a cost estimate would be to increase the depth to include a high dive and include a high dive, we could definitely add that in. But the big thing on my end is more finding out if the YMCA would even look to operate the facility at that point. They didn't voice concerns over the high dive because it was never part of the conversation. They had their initial concerns over just a diving board in general.
So they've already expressed concerns about a regular height.
Yeah, the previous aquatics director was really against the idea of having any form of diving board or even really a dive platform, essentially because of liability concerns and just safety hazards that come along with that. But the new aquatics director has identified more training that they can do to accommodate for a diving board. Now, whether that translates into adding a high dive, that's probably a larger conversation with them.
And do you know offhand how high a high dive is?
I do not.
Okay. Brian, do you know?
Well, I was under the impression, just recollection from the last meeting, that a low dive was about 1 meter, and that anything above that needed to have the increased depth. So a 4-meter diving board, that's a high dive. So I think there's a little bit of
That's what I was
our
thinking.
facts aren't totally straight here. And I can tell you with 99.5% certainty that when we last discussed this, we did want to have the option for looking at those options like a platform. And I can go back and check the video if I have to.
Josh is saying now that the 4 meters is the length of the board?
It's the
and not
length of the board. It's the
Okay.
length of the board, not the height of the board.
Okay. Okay, so we don't know exactly what features, but it sounds like just a very low diving board is included in the plan at this point. Joel and then Rick.
There was a discussion at the last week's Parks meeting, and they reviewed the design also, and the feeling there was they didn't want to deal with the increased liability of the high board. It was people in the field that had expertise in the swimming pool area, and I don't know if it was a swimming coach or what, but they didn't want to take on the extra liability of it and the cost. That doesn't mean at some point in time when we go forward, if the council wants to do that and we can see what the marginal cost is, we could consider it at that time. I'm not sure why we're spending this much time.
Rick.
I would be in favor of hearing again from the Y with different aspects of which depths or height of the board would be appropriate. I'm not comfortable just moving straight forward without that input. Thank you.
When do we have a pool on the agenda again? Does anybody see it? It's not on at this point? Okay.
We don't have a date certain on when we're going to get that report back from the consultant, but when we do, then we'll have the ability for me to come to you and the council president during an agenda setting and establish that date.
Okay, I'm writing it down to talk about at a future date. And I think, I guess just so everybody's on the same page here, I was a little concerned after our last pool workshop where we looked at 3 different options, and we had a pretty extensive discussion about the parking, but we didn't talk so much about what was going on within the fenced area of the pool. And that was partly why we did get additional public feedback from the forum and the survey on what people would like to see for their pool. because when we had the task force, which I think was in 2021, it's been quite a while now, they were primarily looking at where the pool would be sited and whether or not it would be rebuilt at the existing caveman pool location or whether it would be in a different location. And so they did make some initial recommendations about pool features, but their primary job was to talk about the location. And so they had cited it, you know, to do a rebuild at the existing location. And then I felt like after the last workshop that we had about it, we talked about the parking and you know, whether or not we'd have parking in different locations than where it is now. But I didn't feel like we had much of a discussion about the features. So I think that's where some of this confusion now is coming in, that we have kind of caught up to where we need to be as far as, you know, the next final discussion here is about pool features and costs and what we can, what we really want out of it and what we can afford. So that will be our next discussion going forward. Dwayne?
I just want to make a comment. The optics of building a pool right now, while we have public safety funding problems, is just what I'm hearing in the public, and I just want to address that a little bit, saying, hey, it doesn't sound right when we're talking about building a pool and spending money when we can't even fund public safety. So just kind of where I stand right now on the pool is I don't think this should be a priority we should be talking about yet.
Well, I think part of the ongoing discussion that always is going to happen with city government is that we're doing many things at the same time, and things have different revenue streams, and so we can't necessarily spend money on police operations that's dedicated for something like a public improvement project. So that's part of our job as counselors and mayors, to educate the public on these issues. And we do get people saying, you know, how could you talk about, you know, pools when our parks are having issues? And that's just always going to be part of the discussion. Brian?
So this will be my last comment on the pool, but if we're going to be looking at cost estimates, we're on the front end of the project right now. I would like to know what the cost estimates are for the options when we talk about them. We don't have to do them, but I want to know how much it's going to be for the deeper pool. I want to know how much it's going to be for a platform, and then we can say no if we want to. We don't, just getting those numbers doesn't mean we're having to do it, but I would like to have that information in case the community sees that and says, we would like to have that at the pool. If we don't have the information, we're not even going to have it as an option. So I would really like to have that when those numbers come back to us. So I don't know what the rest of council thinks, but I'd like to hear.
Well, with either Brad or Josh, is that something that you feel like at this point that there's almost like a menu that they can just give us a very rough estimate even of how much a particular feature might cost without somebody spending a lot of work on an exact design? Or do we need to pre-order, so to speak, what features we want them to investigate for us?
So it's not necessarily a menu situation or a pre-order situation. At this point, we could touch base with them to see about what it would cost them to, or what they'd have to do that cost. But we'd probably end up spending a lot more on the engineering side because, you know, you tell a cost estimate, oh, we want the pool to be 16 feet deep. I don't know what the depth is for a high dive, or 13, 14 feet deep. Well, they also have to go talk to the, you know, stainless steel pool manufacturer to see what that cost would be. Additionally, they have to figure out what the permitting size would be. Side note, we'd have to figure out where our water table is as far as the groundwater in that location. Just kind of stuff like that. So there's a lot that goes into it. You may end up designing a pool that's not feasible under our current stormwater plan that recently was adopted.
Have the depth rules for a high dive changed? Because that pool had a high dive.
Yes, essentially everything about that pool was built in the 1950s, upgraded 80s, things like that. It does not meet current standards of the public health OHA codes for operating a pool. I think that pool's under 11 feet deep total right now. And even for the shorter board we have designed, it's requiring like 10.6 just for that. But no, it would not be in compliance with the current depth.
Okay. Brian?
I know there's other pools in the state that have those kinds of features, and I know that they get around whatever the issues are, whether it's liability or operations or whatever it is. So this isn't like we're building a rocket ship to try to get to the moon here. I'm just trying to get some rough estimates for features that I think the community would appreciate. And then we can decide if we want them or not.
Josh?
Real quick, the high dive option, there were a handful of people in the community that mentioned that in part of the survey of wanting a high dive. However, by a handful, I mean a handful. It wasn't something that has been called out on that community survey saying, oh, everybody wants a high dive to be very satisfied or somewhat satisfied. So even from that, I think it's kind of strange we're at this point talking of high dives.
Well, I agree, it's very specific, but I have, previous expressed concerns. I think just the conversation about features in general and what everybody wants has not been fully vetted. I have, my kids are grown now, but I spent a lot of time at pools when they were younger, and I've been to a lot of different pools, and there's a lot of different features these days, and our pool, Caveman Pool, is a very basic swimming pool at, what we have now. So I think things have changed a lot since the 1950s, right? And I guess people have different visions in their head of what they want a pool to be, and we haven't had a very thorough conversation about that. I don't know that right now is the time to be doing this, but I think that that's where some of the frustrations coming out is that, we've got our site, we've kind of got a parking plan, and now we need to talk about what's in the middle and what we can afford. And not knowing, I guess, how extensive the design work would have to be in order to just give us some, ballpark figures. It'd be great if they can give us some rough estimates of things with, that'll add $3 million to the cost, right? Without having to do a lot of work, I think is kind of where we're at this point, right? Does anybody have more pool questions that they want asked before we have this come up again? JC?
Sorry, I might have missed it, but I did catch it, that you wanted information regarding the debt. Are you just looking for information in conjunction with the URA, or do you want it as a full encapsulating the city's options as well? Because when you look at that $5 million, if the pool comes in at $10 million, are you going to want to leverage potential other funding options?
I think I was referencing depth of the pool maybe, but we definitely need to have a conversation about how to fund the pool, and I don't know if we want to do that right now.
Well, I think that's the conversation for the next meeting where we get some estimates on how much things are going to cost. Vanessa?
If people still want to talk about the pool, I don't want to move away from that. My topic is not pool related. I did just want to express, I guess, slight disappointment in today's presentation. 4 months ago, when we talked about the URA, we had given direction to put into action the $10 million for housing, and I'm just not seeing that work come to fruition today. There's like maybe 1.5 slides on the topic of housing. And I think that the URA, we have this tool at our disposal to come into compliance with state mandates. The climate-friendly and equitable communities will be coming down. We also have only a handful of years to comply with the housing needs analysis, and so I see the URA as this tool to help us get there and also meet the needs of our community by helping to build housing. Eugene has done some fantastic work. I learned recently at the conference that Eugene has used the URA in that way, and they have incentivized the development of hundreds of market rate units just in the last 5 or 6 years. So I think that we can begin that kind of work here, and I would like to see that type of work prioritized in the next URA discussion.
Okay, does anybody else have things that they want us to touch on in the next URA discussion? Because it sounds like we need to have another one before we get too far down the road. Okay. I think we wrapped up all our questions. Did we, Dana, of what feedback you wanted for URA today?
We got everything.
Okay. Let's move on to our next favorite topic, porta-potties.
Mayor, I apologize, I have to go back to work.
Okay, have a good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Council. Josh Hopkins, Park Superintendent, here today to review the porta potty locations at Riverside Park. This is our quarterly review of the locations and numbers of portable toilets at Riverside Park. It supports Council's action goals of leadership by responding to emergency needs of the public in our parks. Just a brief background slide. 2 portable toilets have been available at Riverside Park since August of 2021. One was on the west of 6th Street, one was on Veterans Way. At the last meeting in June 19th, Council requested to keep, in June, Council requested to keep up to 3 portable toilets at Riverside Park, 2 on the west side of 6th Street and 1 on Veterans Way. At the last meeting in July, it was recommended to remove the portable toilet that was on Veterans Way, and it has been removed due to the low usage of that location, and leave 2 available on the west side of 6th Street. As it stands, here's a brief map showing where the 2 porta pots are located. This includes a hand wash station. Once we designated that as the area for people to rest in Riverside Park, that's why we shifted the priorities over there, and that's why we had less of usage on the one at Veterans Way. As far as expense goes, we're at $1,300 to $1,400 a month for 2 portable toilets and 1 hand washing station. This is having them clean twice daily. It's been that way virtually the whole time. Since the 1.5 years, or about 20 months that we've been doing this project, $8,000 of this cost has came from the ARPA allocation, and then approximately $26,000 of it has came out of the park's general operating budget. So call to action, council discretion, staff's recommendation is continue to provide the 2 portable toilets west of 6th Street location. Alternatives would be to extend the use of the 2 portable toilets in Riverside Park for a specific time period, or discontinue providing portable toilets at Riverside Park. Questions?
Questions? Rick?
Thank you, Josh. Since we've moved the 2 toilets to the west portion of Riverside Park, is there any indication of the percent of usage? In other words, one toilet or one might be used and the other one's not being used. With the ultimate opportunity, do we have the opportunity to reduce it from 2 to 1?
We wouldn't recommend reducing it from 2 to 1 at this point. At any given time, there's kind of a flow of people staying over in that area. Sometimes there's more, one day there's less. Additionally, both those toilets are being used pretty heavily, and our porta pot service provider, hasn't reported back anything saying that one's being used more than the other.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that information.
Any other questions? Vanessa?
This is a question for Erin. I'm not clear entirely on the difference between today's discussion, the porta potty service level versus park buffers, and how that decision was made unilaterally by staff, whereas this one needs constant visitation. I'm not clear on the difference there.
So the park buffers originally was discussed by council, and we implemented some, and then the code does provide for the city manager to have authority to do some minor modifications to some of those park buffers. This specifically from the standpoint, and that's within the municipal code and authority within the city manager. This item is a level of service discussion that was discussed with the city council, in stating that it is in response to a use in the park, and that this is to be going to council on a regular basis, because it's not permanent level of service we're talking about, it's a temporary level of service. And I can't go into a lot of details, because a lot of the items that in detail with this was discussed in executive session, which you will likely recall. So because of that and our discussions in executive session, this is why this is being brought to you on a regular basis. About every 6 months, we're bringing it to you to refresh on whether or not you want to continue this service.
Is it possible for that municipal code that allowed for the park buffer discussion to be applied here, just so that we don't have to consistently be talking about the same level of service? Like, could the staff that are in the parks that observe the usage of the porta potties, could they report back and let you know if it's adequate or not?
I think if we were not in an injunction in dealing with the lawsuit that we're dealing with, that could be a potential. But because of that, we need to make sure that the policy board is reaffirming this temporary level of service.
Thank you.
It seems like at one point we had decided to extend the period between when we had to talk about this, and I don't remember what the time gap was, but if council was interested in, it was 6 months, they're saying?
We believe it's extended to 6 months, because I think the first time we had the discussion, we were doing it for 3 months. And so then it was extended to 6 months.
Just seems like it's coming up very frequently, and if we were able to extend it for a year or until such time as we had an alternate shelter or something, would that be a possibility so that we don't have to have this discussion so frequently?
I think the discussion of twice a year is if that's too frequent, then we can maybe address that, but we do expect the Supreme Court to determine whether or not they're going to hear our case come the end of this calendar year, with maybe a potential decision coming spring, so we might need to do this one more time before we ultimately have resolution to our case.
Dwayne?
I have to agree. I'm pretty sure the parks can let us know how much crap is being put into the toilets and not, and if it's needed or not. I don't need to know the measurements and how much is used. I mean, they seem like pretty smart people, and that's why we hire them, and I figured they're pretty intelligent to say yes or nay, we need to keep it, so I'm to that.
Valerie?
I think we could have settled it in all this time we've been talking about it, but just saying, go forward. I actually I liked getting the amount of money and understanding that $26,000 is coming out of our Parks Department for the utilization of it. That's good information. I think we all need to know that when we talk about the budget and everything, that this is an expensive part of where our general fund money is going. So I appreciate it, and I just say, let's keep it at 6 months and keep doing what you're doing.
All right, well, council, would you be okay with this just going on consent agenda in the future so that we don't have to have a whole presentation and everything? If we need to just reaffirm every 6 months, we'll just reaffirm? All right. Did you hear that? We'd like this to just go on consent agenda in the future, and we'll just sign off on it every 6 months. All right.
Sounds great.
Does anybody have any problems with continuing it for the time being? All right. Move on to the next item here is third quarter work plan.
All right, good afternoon, Mayor, Council, and members of the public that have tuned in. It's my privilege to be able to give you an update on our third quarter report for the strategic plan. This supports council goals of providing leadership and continually evaluating our achievements of our goals as it relates to the direction that you've provided. This is just an overall circle of our process, and you know how this goes, but it starts with you gathering a bunch of information from all your advisory committees, the public, yourselves, and staff, and we determine where we'd like to go, where we need to be. We take a look at our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and we correlate that with people's goals. You ultimately look at and review all of those, prioritize those. We then develop, from a staff perspective, once you've adopted the strategic plan, develop a work plan, and that work plan provides a roadmap on how we're going to accomplish those goals. And they could be a goal that you can accomplish in 3 months. It could be one that will take 5 years or more, like the water treatment plant. But we have those documented in there. And then we ultimately form a budget based on the strategic plan and the work plan. You adopt the budget, which allocates resources for us to then start accomplishing those goals. The goals are in the work plan SMART goals. They're specific, measurable, they're achievable, and we have an assignment associated with those. We know if they're realistic and what type of resources it takes, and then time frame wise, when we'll be working on those. So you have 5 main goals: enhance community safety, provide cooperative shared leadership involving council, staff, and the community, encourage economic opportunities, facilitate sustainable, manageable growth, maintain, operate, and expand our infrastructure to meet community needs. There's 15 objectives, and there's 21 actions which make it a living document. So there's 5 main goals, which are supported by 15 objectives, which are supported by a number of actions associated with those objectives. I'm going to go through each one of the goals, and council has always sort of put a high priority on enhanced community safety, so we're going to start with that. Objective 1, maintain necessary public infrastructure. Action 1, stabilize funding for police and fire services. So further public safety funding options were discussed at a council workshop on July 17th. An ordinance for a utility fee was presented on August 16th and initially passed a first reading. However, second reading, the ordinance failed on September 6th. Council does have a further workshop discussion scheduled for November 13th, and we do have a levy in front of the voters that will be voted on the 1st of November. Hillcrest Station Project. We're preparing a memo which will provide council with some additional information on how to look at this project and what it might need, and provide additional next steps for this station, which is our oldest of the 3 stations. Objective 3, posture grants past to be a leader in addressing homelessness, mental health, drug addiction, and other related issues. Chief Hintzman has taken the lead on this and has been an example for the state of Oregon, and I don't say that lightly. He's done a great job in trying to take this goal and some of the actions. Action 1 is to explore opportunities for the city to bolster mental health and drug addiction services for the unhoused. The police department and ADAPT Integrated Healthcare formalized a partnership to combat drug and alcohol addiction, prevent overdoses, and seamlessly connect individuals to substance use disorder services. When a 911 call is made for a suspected drug overdose, ADAPT's Integrated Healthcare Recovery Mentors will be alerted as police officers and medical personnel are dispatched. After ensuring the area is secure, Grants Pass police officers will facilitate a warm handoff to ADAPT's recovery mentors. This is a great partnership. We're already seeing success in this, and I cannot express enough appreciation for Chief Hintzman and the police department for initiating this program, which ultimately helps everyone in our community. Speaking of the police chief, Chief Hintzman also went up and spoke in front of the State Senate Committee on barriers to illegal substance enforcement, and it's centered around ballot measure 110, and this was under your objective 3 to posture Grants Pass to be a leader in addressing homelessness, mental health, and drug addiction and related issues. Action 2, explore unhoused vehicle program. As you're aware, we do have a program, which is excellent. So we have one on the books. We have the ability and some framework to provide guidance to the community if they so desire to put one in place. The Housing and Neighborhood Specialist continues to act as a liaison in partner with our partners assisting the homeless, which you are probably familiar with them. They're called PATH. And during this period, PATH engaged with several churches to help navigate the possibility of churches hosting a safe parking program, and also brokered a deal with the Massel Project to be the daily contact provider for any safe parking program that begins. So we further that infrastructure from a nonprofit and private perspective. One step closer. Action 3, work with state and local partners to establish homelessness shelter site. There's a couple of slides on this, but Housing and Neighborhood Specialist supported UCAN and the Mid-Rogue Foundation with an application to fund for a potential navigation center in Grants Pass. Unfortunately, the application did not end up receiving an award, but we were working diligently to try to get those funds. The city continues to host PATH monthly meetings in the chamber and be an active partner in that group. Our Housing and Neighborhood Specialist also continues to act as a liaison for PATH. During this period, PATH has assembled a resource guide, which is an up-to-date list of resources available in Josephine County, continued building a volunteer network to be able to utilize this for various service providers as needed and requested. We participated in UCAN's first annual point-in-time count, which is important for our community. We began compiling a list for all volunteer opportunities in Josephine County, supported various events through Angels, an organization that helps homeless persons become housed, and also does homeless-led park cleanup events, aided in getting the Mid-Rogue Foundation's Evans House ready for occupation, and this is a group for senior women coming out of homelessness. So we've done a lot of work with our great partners in our community. Here is a picture of some of our PATH members, and the Housing and Neighborhood Specialist has aided in the planning and implementation of their first open house that they had. Moving to our next goal, provide Crawford shared leadership involving council staff and the community. Develop and implement community communication strategy. Here's some implementation actions that we've done. Our information coordinator and webmaster created a comprehensive guide to grants past the city parks, where each park has a page listing its amenities, address, and a photo slideshow. We didn't really have that highlighted before, and so this was a nice new addition that shows some beautiful things that Grants Pass has to offer. We did create a what do you want to play? And this page lists all the various sporting activities available and which parks offer those amenities, so people will see what amenities are offered in each park. In coordination with the Housing and Neighborhood Specialist, the information coordinator also created an online form that facilitated applying for the Community Development Block Grant Weatherization and Rehabilitation Program, which has been extremely successful in the past year and a half. Nearly half of the applicants used the online form rather than submitting a printed paper application. Again, Amber, our Housing and Neighborhood Specialist, created a marketing plan for the city housing initiatives and incentives. The Housing Advisory Committee reviewed and approved the plan at its September 15th meeting and has requested council review and approve it as well. A lot of great things happening when it comes to housing and when it comes to the unhoused, and I think one of the things you've noticed in what I've just reported here in those two items is the city is an active participant, but it takes a community to address some of these issues. And it's exciting to see how nonprofits have formed or groups have formed to help come together for common good to provide a service, and the city is at the table also. Under Encourage Economic Opportunities, Objective 1, facilitate an environment to encourage business prosperity and economic opportunities. Action 1 is designate a portion of the transient lodging tax to fund tourism-related projects and promotions. We have done that, and we have a sustainable tourism grant program, which was, the first cycle was September 5th, and it closes October 13th. We expect to review the applications at the end of October and take those recommendations to council in November. Create a permanent plaza for downtown. There's been some activity here I'd like to comment on. The Owl Lot survey had netted a return of over 1,000 completed surveys, and that we thought that was very good participation. The majority of respondents did favor a curbless design, and then there was a lot of additional comments associated with the survey, but not with the questions. And we did provide council with a list of the survey answers and all of those items. Mr. Love is scheduled to present the plaza design and layout options at the October 30th council workshop. Increase available biddable lands inventory, and this is with regards to developing proactive solutions to community development challenges. The Allen Creek Transportation Impact Analysis was resubmitted to the ODOT in August, and a tech memo was, with additional comments, was returned to David Evans and Associates. DEA replied to the techno memo and the conference call with ODOT.
Rob is now exiting.
The rezone and annexation application for the 60-plus acres in Allen Creek area, sub-area, will be written and submitted to the Department of Land and Conservation within 30 days after we have concluded the back and forth between ODOT for the transportation impact analysis. This has taken a huge amount of more effort, lift, and pulling than we ever imagined when we first went through this. It has taken it's been a large pull, not only by yourselves, but by staff, by our consultant, and there's just been a lot of work associated with ODOT also. So in the future, if we move forward with these, taking that into consideration might be something to weigh the benefits, the pros and cons of actually having this accomplished. There may be a reason why other cities in the state of Oregon aren't doing this, because if they've thought about this, we've had quite the struggle in working through ODOT in order to get some of our land rezoned. Develop proactive solutions to community development challenges. Develop a program to incentivize smaller footprint homes. The Housing Advisory Committee reviewed minimum lot sizes being proposed in the Middle Housing Development Code, and it has some recommendations to lower the minimum lot sizes for certain zones. This will ultimately provide, of course, higher density in some of those areas and more housing. Develop programs which incentivize increased density development. The Housing Advisory Committee did review several infill development and density incentives, which were discussed July 31st council workshop, and is currently working on further refinement before sending a motion to council. And some of the past things that the past few slides I've talked about are dealing with some amazing volunteers that you have that serve as Sherpas to you on certain subjects and areas like the Housing Advisory Committee. You have a lot of dedicated volunteers that are helping you with policy decisions. Here we go, action 4, schedule bi-monthly workshops with the Home Builders Association. And we just recently had one where they provided some additional information to you and to staff on priorities and where we should go next, and that seems to be working very well. I've only heard good comments coming from council and from the Home Builders Association when it comes to this partnership that was suggested and came out of strategic planning. So objective 2, encourage an environment which provides for the growth of affordable housing opportunities, continuing. Action 1, support and encourage the development of 225 units of housing per year. And I'm happy to say if you add up just these 3 bullets, we're at 216 once those are developed. So we're almost hitting our target just there, and then we'll have more housing. So I think we'll meet that goal. But we have done a number of items like extended option agreements with Chrisman Development to continue the possibility of having 60 affordable units built there off of Ramsey, Nebraska. On the 28th, council did authorize the drafting of an RFP for Allenwood Road surplus property. This could be 60 plus new homes for the development. And then also during the 3rd quarter, the planning department did receive 6 new development applications, which will create brand new 96 dwelling units. So we are well on our way to exceed our goal of 225 units. With regards to Spalding and planning and developing infrastructure, we're working on sewer improvements. You know, this is a big pull also. There are some deficiencies there, but we have done some survey work and it's been completed. Corollo Engineering will be contacting the railroad to discuss methods to cross the tracks at Shannon Lane with regards to those sewer improvements. Whenever you're dealing with the railroad and railroad crossing, it always adds to the complexity and the time, but we are working through that. The downtown lighting project. This is expected to add historical light poles in some areas where we don't have those, but also provide some string lighting across some of the streets. Public Works has been reviewing and working with this project also, as it is a team approach, and there's been some suggestions that we work with a third-party design firm prior to moving forward with any engineering of the lighting project. And so community development staff currently right now is reviewing and reaching out to some design firms to get some additional information on this lighting. And not necessarily, I think, with the historical light poles, but with the other downtown lighting that's expected that we've discussed. Ensure bicycle and pedestrian path needs are met. Action 1, identify opportunities for and improve the safety of fluidity of multimodal facilities in partnership with Bikeways and Walkways Committee. And this specifically is for the 6th and 7th Street multimodal refinement study. The Department of Justice is reviewing the contract documents prior to execution, and ODOT is unsure how long this step will take, but the study will begin once approval is received. So slowly working through that, through the other agencies, but we are making progress.
Aaron, it's kind of baffling to me. Is that the Federal Department of Justice? It's not a big deal. We don't want to spend a lot of time. I just don't understand what they're reviewing.
The state of Oregon, they have to review every contract that ODOT puts out.
So it's the Oregon Department of
Has to go back
Justice.
to the Oregon Department of Justice for
Okay,
review.
thank you.
Here's a great slide. Love this one. So identify and apply for grant funding. We are pleased to announce that we did receive some grant funding. Besides just water treatment plant grant funding, we did receive some grant funding for Reinhardt Volunteer Park in the amount of $200,000 and for playground equipment, which will be coming to you in the fourth quarter to purchase. And also for Dollar Mountain, we received $350,000 to help with trail development. So that's great news. Here's a project you might not be familiar with. It's the Caveman Pool. And I said that jokingly because we talked a lot about it previously. But new infrastructure and repair improvements. New park security cameras were received in September, and we're looking at installing in the fourth quarter. And then we're also making great progress with regards to the Caveman Pool site, which you'll have further discussions likely in the fourth quarter on the pool. Infrastructure repair and improvement, the Baker Park Portland Loo invitation to bid was published in September, and we look like we're going to be able to award the contract. You will be awarding the contract in the fourth quarter. And then Reinhardt Volunteer Park Wetland Trail will continue, and we'll continue to do some more development out there as we install those in the fourth quarter. Here's a great one, acquire Main Street certification. We've been working with a number of partners, also economic development staff has participated in 2 community listening sessions with Civic Possible regarding the development of a downtown association. Both sessions offered a variety of perspectives from downtown businesses, and we're continuing to work on making a report of that information that ultimately will go to council for you to take a look at. Other infrastructure identification. The city unfortunately was not awarded a Community Forestry Inflation Reduction Act grant. We were asking for up to $1.2 million in grant funds to plant over 500 trees plus create an inventory program. We did not get awarded that grant. Infrastructure implementation, 78 trees have been ordered and will be installed in the fourth quarter. That will be replacing some of our current tree canopy and some of our park trees. So that is sort of a conclusion of the highlight of all of our items, and as you may recognize as I went through this, there was stuff that was led by council, there was stuff that was championed by staff, there was a lot of stuff that was championed by the community and us being a partner, and it's so exciting to see and be able to report that, because the more we're engaged in the engagement that we have, I think the more success we have. We're not an island, and so much of what we do we can't do without the help of you setting the policy, a dedicated professional staff, and a very active and passionate community. So with those 3 parts put together, we can do great things, and we are doing great things. What I'm asking here for this slide, and I've got only one more slide after this, is council feedback on work plan items. Are there any items that you'd like us to really target for the fourth quarter and beyond? I will work with staff to make those a highlight. But also I just put a couple of bullet points up. I think this is an exciting time to be part of Grants Pass. Extremely exciting. There's a number of things that 12 months from now, our landscape will change. We'll have answers to things that I'm truly excited about. For instance, water treatment plant funding. 12 months from now, we're going to have a different look, feel, and taste when it comes to that water treatment plant. There's so many exciting things that are happening, that are coming through, and it's going to be great to see that project go through to fruition. Public safety funding and service levels. Yes, it's challenging, but a year from now, I have true confidence that we will have that solved. Council has set that as a priority, and I'm excited to see where we ultimately end up. Measure 110 has drastically impacted our community and communities throughout the whole state of Oregon in not a positive fashion. It has had a negative impact on this community and the state of Oregon. And I'm very much looking forward to the potential reform that might occur in this next year. So maybe standing here when I'm doing a third quarter report a year from now, we'll be able to report some positive movement there. And then also, a year from now, we should be resting assured on where we stand with our case, our lawsuit, and the decision that the Supreme Court, we believe, will finally make if they hear that. And that'll affect the way we can do time, place, and manner with the unhoused in public spaces, and also may affect definitely our case and potentially even some of the Martin Boise. And then Urban Renewal Agency, which we talked about today. We are, as the mayor mentioned, we're starting to move into it's no longer a toddler, right? It's a teenager almost now, and it has a lot more opportunity and ability to do things. And so I'm excited a year from now what we might have in place with the Urban Renewal Agency. So those things alone are just so exciting and provides me and staff a lot of energy when it comes to all the positives that we have in front of us. And with that, if you have any feedback on the fourth quarter, and then I've got one more slide for you, and maybe I'll do the next slide and then see if you have any feedback, I guess. The other item is associated with your strategic plan. I sent a memo out maybe a month ago asking council for consideration of our strategic plan and where we want to go this year, providing two options. The first option is asking council if they would be interested in acquiring an outside consultant to provide the service of strategic planning. I've had contact with a consulting firm, Coraggio Group. This is also the consulting firm that the League of Oregon Cities Board has contracted with for their strategic plan, and will also be contracting with for the state of Oregon, where we're going to be helping small cities, those cities 5,000 population and under, helping them develop strategic plans. And we've got a great program that we're putting in place, and it's great that we're going to do that as a league. Coraggio Group does have two options for us when it comes to strategic planning. They have option one, which is a basic strategic plan session, which costs $15,000. And option two, they have a more comprehensive strategic plan session at a cost of $60,000. And I'm hoping council may consider that option, and or option two, consider continuing with our strategic plan for a second year, as we have a very robust strategic plan that has got a lot of depth in it. And we could do another 12 months and still not accomplish everything in that plan, as it is a very deep strategic plan. Or option three is identified by council as where to move forward with our strategic plan for the upcoming year. But it's my recommendation that we go with option one or option two.
Thanks, Aaron. Let's talk first about the third quarter review. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Valerie, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I always think it's a positive to look at what we're doing, so thank you for that. I think that, I guess it's important. It's nice to see some of the things that we've been waiting for coming through fruition. I'm very frustrated with ODOT, but as are you. I did have a question on 15, and that was a implementation. The Housing and Neighborhood Specialist created a marketing plan for city housing incentives initiatives. The Housing Advisory Committee reviewed, approved it, and has requested council review and approve it as well. So is that going to be on our agenda soon, or? We'll
have Brad give you some additional information on that.
Okay.
Yeah, the HAC has completed it. Their comments, we just made some final edits to it. So this is one of those documents that's in our housing production strategy as well. You know, it's not mandated that council adopt it. So I guess we kind of somewhat looking for some feedback. We can bring it forward to you in a business meeting with a resolution if you want to formalize it to a certain degree. It's more of an operational kind of document, just sort of showing, how are we going to do outreach to the community, to the development community, to exterior multifamily developers, things like that, sort of how does that work? So it's completed, so I guess we can either do it to you as a memo, where you can just kind of review it and have comments if you want, or we can formalize it. It's, like I said, it's not one of those things that's required to be adopted formally.
Well, I think it's important we see it, because I
Oh,
know a lot of
absolutely.
work has gone through in that, and I think that's a big part of what we want to see, and knowing that we're out marketing. And even, it's not a bad idea to freshen us on what's come through the process. So I don't know if anybody else wants a workshop, but I would at least like to see it through a memo.
Any other feedback or questions about the third quarter update? Vanessa?
I did want to provide feedback on the homeless site goal. If I have learned anything in the tours and the other cities that I've communicated with, it's that it's very integral for cities to get involved in helping facilitate and create a homeless shelter site. I know that we were really diligent last fall in these discussions, and they kind of fell off. I do see it on the back of the agenda, so I would like to see that revitalized again.
Okay, anybody else? All right, let's move on to the strategic planning discussion. Does anybody have thoughts on how they would like to move forward with strategic planning for 2024? Joel and then Rick.
One of the things that concerns me with any of our processes, if we, and we do a good job, Aaron, you do a good job of facilitating the strategic planning process, but it's an in-house plan, and so when somebody's not satisfied with the results, they blame the facilitator. That's not uncommon. And that's the advantage of bringing in an outside facilitator, because then you don't have to live with that baggage the rest of the year. So bringing in the outside facilitation, it's expensive, but it does have that advantage from not doing it in-house. Now that doing it in-house, it's inexpensive. We've done a good job in the past. It hasn't given the result that each one of us would want individually. And so there's been some critique of that. You're going to have that with any of the strategic planning processes. But if you have a consultant, you blame them rather than the in-house facilitator, which is, I'm not sure that's a valid reason for spending $15,000 or $60,000. But that's what I've observed, not only here, but over the last 30 years.
Rick?
I'd be willing to consider option one, with option one of the 15,000. Thank you.
We do have budgeted, I think, 17,000 or something like that for strategic planning. So there is funds available for option one of one and one.
Valerie?
Yeah, I think, we're to the point, and I have always thought, Aaron, that you've done a great job at strategic planning, but we've kind of hit some bumps along the road, and I think that's just because it just needs to be revitalized. I just think that, so I would be in favor of the 15,000 and just have somebody else come in and kind of give us a different way to look at it and see if maybe that we can work through that.
Anybody else going to jump in? DJ?
Yeah, I'm not happy about having to make this decision. I think, Aaron, you've done a great job. I don't think if it's any fault of yours that we're being kind of encouraged in this direction. But if the option is to just go with last year's strategic plan or pay money to do another one, I think forward progress is imperative. So if that being said, those are my only two options, then sure, and then we're going to have to pay money to get outside consultant to facilitate it.
Vanessa?
I don't know that these are necessarily our only options. I think that they are just two options that are presented to us. I don't know that the current strategic planning we have is so flawed that we need to scrap it entirely. I don't believe that. I think it can be trimmed up a little bit. I don't know that it has to be 3 days, but I think the basis of it, hearing from the community, hearing from committees and hearing from staff, and then having the opportunity for council to throw their ideas in the ring, I think that those are all worthy endeavors. I don't know that we need to go out to a facilitator for this process. I think what we have just trimmed up works great.
All right, Joel, I wasn't really sure. Are you supportive of the $15,000 plan?
I can support that, or I can support option 2, either one. Both will work.
Okay. Dwayne? Thoughts? I mean, it's kind of tricky here because Brian and I, it sounds like Rob has also left, are you out there, Rob? Yeah, I think he's gone. So, I mean, I've got 3 right now saying, 15,000. Vanessa saying modify our current. Joel could go with option 1 or option 2. I'm personally missed the memo apparently, but I've heard some talk about this, but I'm not exactly sure what the driver is here on this. But either way, we need to make a decision on how we're going to move forward.
I'll just go with the majority, I guess, if option 1's the one. I don't see going to be much change from what we did this year to next year, really, though, from people's ideas. I think most people's ideas are going to be very similar with their wants and needs. So, but if it's going to make it more equal and fair and keep staff off of the hook, and I don't know. I mean, we don't know what option 1's going to turn out to be like, so that's the only thing I can say is, I guess if that's the majority, I'll go with them. I don't really have a problem with either one.
Mayor?
Yeah, Rick.
I have no problem with option 2, and I also agree that Aaron's done a fantastic job over the years, and I appreciate the effort he's put into it. It's very innovative. Brian and I were discussing a strategic plan on the way to LOC, and the main thing we felt would be appropriate would be to cut down the amount of time the different agencies are present. Instead of giving them 20 minutes, maybe give them 10 minutes. And then on staff, because we deal with staff all the time, and we feel in many aspects or respects, we as the counselors are up to speed unless there's a new counselor on board. Then maybe we don't have to go into the detail in staff presentations. And as Vanessa expressed, we could actually condense that time frame down, and that would be a real advantage. Thank you.
Go ahead, Val.
I have a question for Aaron. Does the group that you checked with, is it always a 3-day period, or how do they run their strategic planning? Just out of curiosity, are you aware?
Yes, I am. It's somewhat flexible, but it is, they do some work in the beginning, just like we do, and it's very similar. I don't think it's a 3-day process though. And for the option 1, I have my memo over there, and the memo that I provided council has the exact what they do and the amount of time they spend on it.
Just from the people that I talked to, I think the biggest one was they were trying to cut it back and make it less time, is what I kind of heard from the council. But personally, I think it would be good to get some fresh blood into the organization, because I think sometimes we get stuck, and I think that's why I'm willing to go for the 16,000, just because I think we could use some sort of outside to get us moving forward.
Thanks. Yeah, that was going to be my question. Given that, as Aaron stated, we do have a lot of irons in the fire as far as what we're currently working on, what do people hope to get out of it if we were to go forward with a $15,000 planning session? Rick?
Well, you made an interesting point, the amount of time and effort that goes into the strategic plan, because I know basically the month of December, staff is devoting all their time to doing that. So while if we were to choose the 15,000, it would also relieve staff of putting that together. And as Valerie pointed out, possibly a new perspective. Thank you.
I guess I'm just hearing very lukewarm support for moving forward with the $15,000. So
You have 3 people for option 1. I'll just say option 1. I'll make it 4.
At 50, or at whatever the lower price.
okay, well, I guess doesn't really feel like strong majority interested in going forward with that, but if that's the direction that we're going, I hope you will think about what you want to get out of the process that's different than what we've done in the past, and we can move forward with spending more time in the right areas or whatever it is that you're looking to do with the process.
Whose right areas? I think that's part of the problem.
Absolutely. It feels weird that people aren't talking more about this. I personally would be inclined to continue with the current plan because I think that we need to make some forward progress on some of the initiatives we've already started rather than starting something new, and that we could come up with a modified process where we do hear feedback from our committees on anything that they would like to propose to us.
Perhaps, and I'll just put my hands up, perhaps we should put a few of those things into the consultant to let them know that's where we want to go. I mean, that's my thing. Personally, last year was disastrous for me in a lot of ways of what happened and that sort of thing, and there's a lot of different big personalities, and I think sometimes, if you work with the consultant and say, this is, we don't want a whole bunch of new things, I agree with you. We have enough sticks in the fire that we're dealing with right now. I think just having consultants to help us gel with those, and obviously, after last year's, Aaron didn't want to go forward with that, so out of respect for him, I think it would be worth having somebody come in and help with some of the divisiveness that came out of it. I think for us to do it without that fresh breath would not help us. I think that we need a third party. I think we can help direct a third party ahead of time by letting them know what we want. I would agree with that, but I do think that we'll get more out of it if we have some fresh air put in the process.
All right, well, it sounds like that's what we'll do, is move forward with that. But yeah, I do hope you all will spend some time thinking about what you want, what you think the priority for how we spend our time is at that meeting, and what you would like to see done differently, and so you can get that back to the consultant before we move forward with the actual event. And also let me know, if I need to take 3 days off from work, or whether I can just not participate in the future, if you all don't think my input is valuable. Aaron?
I just love to end on a high note and want to say thank you for the direction you provided on the strategic plan, but also I want to thank you over the past year for your policy direction in order for us to accomplish some of these goals, and the intermediary direction that you've provided during workshops and council meetings. I also want to thank a extremely professional, dedicated community building staff That has been absolutely amazing in order to make this strategic plan happen and make those wheels turn. And then thank you, community. We have been able to report in this year's plan much more community involvement in these goals and objectives and tasks that we're doing that we have in years past. And that is definitely a kudo to the community in getting involved in helping us achieve our community goals. So thank you to everyone.
Yeah, thanks to the staff. There's a lot of work that's being done here, and I think, like we mentioned earlier, it is important to remind the public that we have a lot of different things we're doing all the time. So it's good to review and see some of the progress that's been made over the past year. All right, agenda review. We have a meeting on Wednesday with a public hearing on amending the comprehensive plan map to repeal the zoning transition overlay. Then we have the council action item regarding chapter 6.4, addressing standards, which is street numbering and address standards. Address, yeah, it's a tricky word. Okay, address standards. It's a noun, not a verb. I was like, addressing what standards? So vague. Now I see address standards. Okay, next up, resolution regarding the Allen Creek Crossing SDC waiver application, resolution to install a Portland Loo at Baker Park. We're on council consent calendar now, a resolution regarding volunteer park, Reinhardt Volunteer Park playground equipment, a resolution for right-of-way landscape maintenance services, motion to certify the election results. Hey, now that's over. Motion to approve the findings of fact regarding stormwater development standards. And that last one's been bumped. A couple things there at the end have been bumped. Then our next workshop would be October 30th regarding Owl Lot Plaza update. All right, any questions, comments about any of those things? Okay, I've written down a number of things to add in the future, so I'll just let you all know what they are. We need to have a follow-up on Caveman Pool regarding features and cost estimates. We need to review housing incentives with regard to our housing production strategy and the marketing plan that staff was going to have us take a look at. We need to have another URA meeting regarding grant specifics of the grant loan programs and potentially clean up our list a little bit of what projects are on the URA. And then I know they mentioned in here that staff is going to get back to us with a memo about the fire station, Hillcrest Fire Station, and where that project is at. But then we also had some questions about whether or not we could move forward with getting some approval from other taxing districts as well as a cost estimate for the Hillcrest project. Joel.
So I was wondering on a point of order, Mayor, on the swimming pool, I'm not sure there's 3 people that support making that an agenda item, and rather just keeping it as a informal request for staff as they work towards that. If there's other amenities, there's one council person that wants a high-level diving board or platform, and so that we just informally ask them as part of their cost estimates to come back to us with that. But I don't think to be honest with you, I don't think there's 3 people that would support that as an agenda item.
I don't know that the diving board is the agenda item, but the cost of the pool in general is definitely an agenda item.
That needs to be discussed.
Yeah,
That's not how you phrased that, though.
I said
we'll be
features
bringing
and
that
cost
forward to you
estimates.
once and it's not scheduled yet because the consultant isn't done with it. Once we have a date that we know they're ready, I'll be going to the mayor and council president to get that on the agenda. So it's going to be a future discussion, so you could view that.
And that sounds great. That sounds great. Thank you.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Oh, yes. Aaron has
Aaron.
something.
So you may recall about a week ago or so, we sent you a email, I think it came from Karen, with regards to the, our organizational survey that we're doing. And there was also a link on that. Part of the survey includes a couple of questions from the consultant of you. So if you could go to that email again, click that link and schedule a time the consultant would like to speak with you individually on a one-on-one basis, and your answers will be included in the survey. So that's real important, and the sooner that we get that done, the sooner we can get going and initiate the survey within the organization.
Is this the email or is this a different one? So is this the number?
That's the memo, and within the memo within the email, there's a link.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah, within the email, there's a link, you just click and it goes to his calendar, and you just set up a time for him to give you a call.
Okay, thank you.
Joel?
So I got an email from, not District 7, but the county school district, and they were requesting some action from the council associated with some recent events and prevention of some measures to take to protect students. And it was places where parks and campers, homeless folks were interfering with school activities. I'd like Aaron to address that. I'm not sure we need to put it on the agenda, but we do need to have an open discussion of that, and whether it needs to be a future agenda item. Aaron, could you give me your opinion on that? And I don't want to put you on the spot. If you don't want to go on the spot, I can explain it.
So Augustus did send you some correspondence that gave you just some updates on our discussions that we've had with both School District 7 and Three Rivers School District. Both of us have talked to the superintendents from both schools with regards to their concerns. We could give you some additional information with regards to, I think, the specific item that is being discussed in your email. I haven't seen the email, so maybe if it's forwarded to me, I can better address that issue. But between Augustus and I, we could pool something together and give you whatever information we have as an email or memo to council. And then you could determine whether or not it's something you want to discuss on the dais, or if it's something that's even discussable at this point.
Sure, so I'll send you that email, and then we can make our determination of what route we want to go. Okay.
Vanessa?
I did also have interest in that topic discussion for possibly having an executive session with our legal counsel, Aaron Heisel. I know it sounds like the council has a lot of interest in this topic, so I think that would be warranted at this time.
Regarding schools and parks?
Specifically, yeah.
Okay. It's been a little while since we met with Aaron Heisel anyway. Is that something that council's interested in?
Well, knowing that I also was a part of that email that that Joel requested, and of course I have been privy to what's going on with this school district, so it would be nice to have some guidance and some understanding from him as to where we stand on that in terms of is it a policy decision or is it a legal decision, and just get some reinforcement from them as to what the Aaron has to say about it.
Dwayne?
I think we'd be okay with talking to legal counsel, because I've had 2 school board members kind of pin me down on the street, so, and I'm not an expert in the field, so I don't know how to answer the question, so.
Okay, Augustus, is that something you think we'd need executive session?
Yeah, if we're going to have that discussion, we should do it in an executive session. We can get that lined up.
Okay. Sounds good. Anything else? All right, DJ, you want to make the motion today?
Move to adjourn.
Seconded by Vanessa. All in favor of adjourning today?
Aye.
Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, see you Wednesday.